Here's your moderator, Julia Funaki.
Hi everyone, we're so glad you joined us today for the webinar. I am Julia Funaki, and just a little bit about me. I have worked in higher education for nearly 3 decades, and all but about 3 years of that was with a focus in international education. What drew me to the field was an interest and desire to engage in international studies and cross-cultural communication. But what kept me here was fabulous mentors and wonderful colleagues. For example, when I first took my first international job at Ohio Wesleyan University, I was taking over for Johnny Johnson, who was on sabbatical in Malaysia with the MUSEA program. Then I did a presentation on the Soviet system of education with the support of Marcel Hirschaft. My first experience in presenting at a national conference was when John Dupree asked me to do a study on international students and using the CLEP exam. It was at that second of those presentations on that topic at AACRAO that I met Dale Goff. So I've also had the pleasure over the years of working directly with Bill Paver, Gloria Nathanson, Valerie Rolston on various projects and committees. And I tell you about those people just so that you'll get an understanding that the strength of any organization and any field of work is the ability to engage new generations of persons inspired to do the work that it takes to keep that organization or that work dynamic. That is what today's webinar is about, encouraging and supporting professionals in continuing our work in international education. Now let me introduce to you Ann Koenig. Ann Koenig has been an Associate Director with AACRAO since 2002. Her career path in international ed includes foreign credential evaluation and professional evaluation services, as well as campus-based work in international admissions, student records management, academic advising, and transfer credit evaluation at institutions in Wisconsin, California, and Germany. With strong support from mentors and colleagues, Ann has been involved in doing research on the educational systems of other countries since early in her career. As a credential evaluation specialist in the region of the former Soviet Union in Eastern Europe, her first major project was the peer workshop report on Poland, which you'll hear more about in this webinar. Shortly after that, she wrote a monograph on the educational system of Albania in the ECE Presents series. Based on her research on the countries of Central Asia, Ann also contributed several country profiles to the AACRAO Edge database. She also wrote part of the 2008 AACRAO Country Guide on Russia. In addition to her country-related information, Ann has also written about international admissions best practices and credential fraud issues for several AACRAO publications. She has presented at conference sessions and training programs sponsored by AACRAO, NASA, NAGAP, EAIE, and other organizations in the U.S. and Europe. She's also served on both AACRAO and NASA national committees. Ann wanted to present, and I wanted to moderate this webinar for AACRAO International today because we strongly believe in the importance of reaching out to the next generation of researchers and keeping the AACRAO legacy of leadership in international education research going strong. So let's get to it. Ann?
Hi, Julia. Thanks so much for the introduction, and welcome everybody to our webinar today. Today, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce all of you to AACRAO's new Research Fund for International Education, which honors our colleague Gloria Nathanson, who retired from service to international education this year. Gloria began her work in international education in 1973 in the international section of the undergraduate admissions office at UCLA, where she was trained by Inez Sepp-Meyer, one of our profession's pioneers. Gloria spent her entire career at UCLA, where she became Associate Director for Undergraduate Admission and Relations with Schools, with wide-ranging responsibility for international selection and admission, recruiting and marketing, and administration. Gloria attended her first AACRAO annual meeting in Miami Beach in 1978. I first met her in the early 90s when I joined the AACRAO International Education Committee, which she chaired at that time. Our paths converged again as colleagues in the University of California system, when I became the International Admissions Specialist at UC Berkeley in the late 90s. Gloria was a leader in the UC system doing system-wide planning and policy making. Her leadership roles in AACRAO increased as she went on to become the AACRAO Vice President for International Education and later the chair of the AACRAO Task Force on International Admission and Credential Evaluation. She chaired the AACRAO International Education Standards Council until she retired from AACRAO service this summer. Today, we're here to honor Gloria's contributions to our profession by inviting you and hopefully inspiring you to continue AACRAO's legacy of leadership in international education research by becoming the next generation of AACRAO authors. In this webinar, we'll talk a little bit about the history of AACRAO's contributions to the education system research and placement recommendations, a heritage that you can become part of. We'll give you information about the new research fund and some tools to help you put together a proposal and share some words of wisdom from AACRAO authors. We hope that all this will energize you and inspire you to apply for a research grant. Did you know that AACRAO has been doing country system research since the 1950s? After World War II, the GI Bill created a boom in higher education, with former soldiers going to college and international student numbers increasing. The U.S. government started researching foreign educational systems and publishing booklets on the ed systems through the then Office of Education. Every AACRAO member institution received a copy free in the mail. The government even provided free foreign credential evaluation reports for individuals with education outside the U.S. AACRAO then got involved because of the need for placement recommendations on how U.S. institutions could view the education presented by an international student. In 1955, AACRAO led the way in forming the group that would be the leader in developing placement recommendations for the next 50 years, the National Council on the Evaluation of Foreign Credentials. The council membership represented several sectors of higher education, from junior colleges through graduate schools. AACRAO established the World Education Series. These booklets were meant to be used in conjunction with the Department of Ed country studies and included the council-approved placement recommendations for each country. Each title in the series included the subtitle, A Guide to the Academic Placement of Students from Whatever Country in Educational Institutions in the United States. In 1964, the U.S. Agency for International Development, AID, asked AACRAO to do credential evaluations for students who were involved in AID programs. That was the beginning of non-governmental credential evaluation for individuals. Here in this slide, we see some booklets from this time period. Above, the AACRAO World Education Series booklet on Afghanistan from 1961. It's not very long, only about 6 pages, of which 4 pages of actual text, of which only 4 of the pages are actual text about placement of students from Afghanistan, organized into 3 sections: admission at college freshman level, undergraduate admission with advanced standing, and conclusion. The rest of the booklet is a listing of the AACRAO Association officers and committee members of the time, a very interesting historical document for AACRAO history. And the 2 books below that represent the partnership of the U.S. Department of Education and AACRAO at that time. The booklet on the left is Higher Education in the USSR from 1963, a pretty comprehensive report on Soviet higher education, including the actual higher ed curricula for many fields of study at different types of higher ed institutions. It's a real gem for the Cold War era, when it was hard to get information about USSR education. Based on this book, AACRAO did a World Education Series report on the USSR with placement recommendations. That's the book on the right. I've got all three of these books on my library bookshelf, and being a specialist on the former Soviet region, especially that Department of Ed USSR booklet, is pretty worn out. Moving into the 70s, there was a change in federal government funding of this type of research. The Office of Ed Country Reports were around till about the late 70s. But then the funding was shifted to the U.S. Information Agency, USIA, to support research and publications done through AACRAO and NAFSA. This was the boom era for international education research through our professional associations. With support from the federal government and additional fundraising by project managers, the research projects became workshops, a group of colleagues doing research in country and then writing a report on education in the country or region. The group would then suggest placement recommendations for review by the council, and the approved placement recommendations would be published in the report. This was a fabulous professional development experience for us and really grew our collective credential evaluation research library. These images show you just a few of the workshop reports that were published during this boom time. Any of them look familiar? I've got all of them on my bookshelf. With the U.S. government no longer offering foreign credential evaluation for individuals, the mid-70s and 80s also saw the establishment of professional foreign credential evaluation services, mostly by former admissions and registrar staff who worked with international credentials. Some of them started doing their own research publications too, and some of their evaluators also participated in the AACRAO and NAFSA workshops. By the late 90s, federal government financial support was gone, and the internet was our new tool for doing research. Armchair or desktop research was born. Anybody out there who remembers those first computers we had on our desktops? Gigantic things with tiny storage capacity and DOS commands? Amber or green characters blinking across a dark gray screen? That's what it was like when I first started in this profession. We had those big floppy disks for saving our typewritten files. Let's fast forward to the 2000s. The world is literally at our finger and thumb tips. The AACRAO Edge database now brings the whole world to life in just a few seconds. Colleagues still do research and contribute to the Edge country files, but the Council has faded away, and now the AACRAO International Education Standards Council reviews placement recommendations that are published in Edge. No more big books to lug around and clutter up the library bookshelves. But you book lovers, never fear, because the old books and all that wisdom are still available, archived in AACRAO Edge. Each country overview page gives a link to the scanned AACRAO World Education Series books and peer workshop reports for that country or region from the days of yore, just in case you have an applicant or a student, or even an applicant for employment on your campus who has credentials from the days of yore. There are still a few of us around. And for those who will be submitting a proposal, these archived books are a good way to see what kind of research work was done for each country in the past. And here we are today, still doing research, still working together on projects to gather information and share it with our community. Now, instead of having to write a postal letter to an institution in a far-flung country to get information and hoping we get a response ever, we can message or email or chat or have a webinar with colleagues there and get info in real time. We can do what we're doing right now, connecting with each other across the country, or maybe even across the world, right from our desks, or the airport, or wherever we happen to be doing our work. Which brings us to our first poll question. Have you participated in an AACRAO webinar before? Please click the answer that pertains to you.
And while you're doing that, let me just tell you that AACRAO continually hosts webinars, which are free. We have another one coming up on GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, in November 14th, in honor of International Week. So keep watching our website for more opportunities to get involved by participating in an AACRAO webinar.
Great, and Julia, I just want to add that that's the EU GDPR, the European Union, which affects all of us around the world. So great, we have a newcomer, welcome, and it's great to see that many of you have attended webinars before, and as Julia said, we're going to be offering more and more into the future, and we love it when you participate. So let's go back to the future now. Whoops, thank you. And talk about the new International Research Fund. And as I said, one of the ideas behind it is to grow our next generation of researchers, you. We're looking for colleagues who want to contribute new information to our knowledge base. So either as a country profile, maybe for a country that hasn't been researched yet, or substantial updates of information for countries we don't see very often. Maybe you're aware of, maybe you have applicants from a country where there isn't much information available, or a country where there's been significant changes that we don't yet have in our current resources. Or maybe there's a topic you're interested in researching that isn't country-specific. That could become a white paper. Here are some examples of things we're interested in. These could be based on, for example, a case study from your institution, or something you're researching for another purpose, like grad school, or a topic you prepared for a presentation or a paper. What inspires you? There's a host of things that could inspire you to do a project like this. You can also do a group project. The funding isn't just for an individual project. Maybe you'd like to involve another partner at another institution, or you'd like to connect with Education USA advisors in a particular country, or make use of language skills. What makes the light bulb glow for you? Time for another poll question. Do you have a proposal in mind right now? Let us know. Yes, no, I'm thinking about something. Seems like most people are mulling something over. It looks like 50%. Wow. Half and half. Oh, good. Looks like there are some ideas out there. Well, I think we'll have time at the end of my presentation for questions and answers, and then we'll have a chance to talk about whatever questions you might have about the process or ideas you might have in mind. So great. Thanks for your input on that, and it's good to see that we've got some light bulbs starting to burn out there. So we're going to go through now some important information that you need to know for submitting a proposal. This information is all on the Research Fund website, so don't worry if you don't get a chance to read through all the details on the slides right now. You can always go back to the website and this information will be there. The timing. For this year's award, the application process starts on October 1st. in a few days. And you basically have the months of October and November to submit a proposal. And the funding would start in January. So keep this in mind. This is the first time we're offering this fund. This is the first year. And we're planning to offer it every year. So if this year doesn't work out for you, keep those great ideas cooking in your brain and be prepared for next year's announcement. Every year the amount of the funding will be different. The money is intended to cover costs that are directly related to your research. So in your estimated budget for your project, be sure to show how the figures in the budget relate to your research. The proposals will be reviewed by Melanie Gottlieb, AACRAO's Deputy Director. She's also the head of our international office, and the IPAC, AACRAO's Committee for International Research Publications. And if you'd like to see more information about that committee, here's the website where you can link to that information. We want to show you a little bit about the criteria that will be used for assessing proposals. And again, this information, these main points that are listed in black, the questions are on the website. I want to give you some tips, and that's the text in red, for writing an effective proposal that will address what the committee is looking for. Above all, go through these questions that are listed on the website and be sure that your proposal is well thought out and answers the questions. Regarding scholarly merit and professional impact, basically, the committee wants you to tell them why you think your research is needed and why you should be the one or the group to do it. Also, who you think will use this research and how it can be disseminated to the intended audience. I'll give you a couple seconds to read through this. Now I'll move on to the next point, clarity of proposal. And again, the items in the questions in black are on the website. Keep in mind that your proposal will be a sample of your writing style. So when you're writing up your proposal, keep in mind that writing up text for country-related research, clarity is an absolute must. The committee will be looking for a clear statement, written in a style that's appropriate to the intended audience, of the purpose and goals of your project and how various parts of it tie into the whole. They'll also want to know whether or how your research might fit in with existing information on the country or topic. And on that note, I just want to give you an example. Julia mentioned my monograph for ECE on the Albanian educational system that I wrote in 1992. The first thing I did was to look for literature. What's already out there? Who's already written about the Albanian educational system? Well, there was only one book written in English. It had been written in 1969 at Stanford University, so I was happy there was something available in English. And there was only one other book available in any other language, in German, located at a library in Bavaria. That was it for the whole world. The Library of Congress confirmed that for me. Finding these books and finding what was available was kind of a difficult task. But describing how my research would fit into the existing literature turned out to be very easy. Continuing on with the clarity of the proposal, give a clear description of how you're actually going to do your research. And if there's more than one person involved in the project, describe each colleague's role. As far as budget, don't forget to outline not only expected costs, but also expected time needed for the project. Consider your workload on the job and be realistic about the timeline you present for the project. If you haven't already done so, approach your supervisor or employer to discuss whether or how much of your work time you might be able to devote to the project. If you get their support, you might ask them for a statement or a letter confirming that, which you can add to your proposal package. In Gloria Nathanson's words of wisdom, which we'll see a little bit later in the presentation, she says, she reminds us that these days our employers aren't able to give us the kinds of resources that used to be available for this type of extra professional work. Remember all the funding we had through the U.S. government and through our professional associations. So be sure to consider the amount of your own personal time that you will need to spend on your project and your commitments outside of work, like family or community activities, whatever they may be. Need some help or encouragement? Need some ideas? If you decide to undertake this adventure of submitting a proposal, you'll be walking in the footsteps of many, many AACRAO colleagues who have come before you. No need to be nervous and no need to feel alone. We're here waiting for you, our next generation. Here you see links to resources that you'll find on the Fund webpage. There's a sample project proposal that I actually wrote based on a proposal I wrote years and years ago, a proposal for a project on country X. That'll give you some ideas about writing a country proposal. And the other document, the Words of Wisdom from Colleagues, is a collection of testimonials and words of wisdom from colleagues who have done AACRAO research projects and wanted to share their experience with you. And here are some of them. Maybe you recognize some of them. You'll find their photos and reflections in the testimonial docs on the website. Just to go around the circle, starting up clockwise, starting at 11 o'clock, our colleague Marjorie Smith at the University of Denver. Jasmine Saidi Kunert from the Evaluation Service, ACEI. Jim Fry, who was the founder and president of ECE, the Evaluation Service, who's now retired. Note that we saved a little space for your face in this montage. At the bottom right, we have a photo of the peer workshop group who did the peer Poland and peer Czechoslovakia workshop reports in 1991. That was one trip with two groups who went to those countries and had some meetings. Julia, I just noticed the green arrow there. That's me in 1991. I did
that for you, Ann.
Thank you. Anyway, there are some just fabulous, fabulous colleagues in this photo who contributed so much to our profession. And at the end of our workshop report, we had a dinner. And Julia, could you point out Fred Lockyer, please? Over there on the right. That's Fred Lockyer, a wonderful, wonderful colleague of ours who passed away recently. He did a lot of research on Iran in the 70s, and you know the 70s were kind of a troubling time for Iran. So these are the people, the ones who are still with us, who will support you. Next we have at the bottom of the slide in the middle our great colleague Ava Adan, who from Georgia State University, and then she was also active in leadership and engineering credentialing through ABET and NCES. She also worked with us at AACRAO, and she's now an independent consultant. And then on the bottom left, we have Ed Devlin, who is also in that picture of the peer workshop report group. He was the editor for the report, and one of the claims to fame of that workshop was it was the first peer workshop to have a laptop computer in the country with us doing the work. And that was in 1991. One laptop for all these people. So these are the people who are here to support you and and are so hoping that you will join this group. There are many, many other people out there, some still active. Julia mentioned some of their names, some now retired. All of them, including me and Julia, will tell you about the hard work, excitement, crazy adventures, cultural challenges, and immense rewards of being involved in a research project in international education. And they will all tell you how much they would like to see your face in this slide in the future. I'll give you a few moments to glance through Gloria's words of wisdom. These words from Gloria herself ring true for all of us who have done an AACRAO International Education Research Project. What you learn about educational systems will be an invaluable tool at your desk. It will make your work easier and better informed. It will connect you to the larger world of AACRAO professional development, and you'll become a resource person for the whole international education community, and I want to say around the world. It will be gratifying and it will be satisfying. All words absolutely true. So I hope this has given you a moment to read Gloria's words. I want to just move on. What happens if your proposal isn't selected? Here we're giving you all these encouraging words and support. What happens if you submit a proposal and it's not chosen? Well, never fear. There's always next year. This is just the beginning of this research fund. And there are so many ways to become involved in AACRAO's international activities. Right now, we're looking for colleagues interested in participating in the Cuba project. You can see the link there. There will be a research project that goes to Cuba in this coming spring, and will produce a report on updates in the Cuban educational system. It will be like the workshop reports, the peer workshop reports from the past. So be sure to check that out if you're interested, because we want a robust group for that one. And Spanish language proficiency is not a requirement. Would you be willing to give a presentation at an AACRAO conference? That's an excellent way to share information and research. Or maybe you have country information to contribute to EDGE. Updates are always welcome. AACRAO has 4 international committees that mainly work on creating an excellent program for each year's annual meeting. They all need you. And we're always looking for writers in many areas. Check out Be an Author online. And under our first bullet point, I skipped over the International Education Standards Council Fellowship. That's a position where a colleague would work with the council for a year on specific research projects. And as we mentioned before, a new trending topic, which is going to be very important for our campuses, the EU, European Union GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, data privacy for EU citizens, no matter where in the world they are.
Also, Anne mentioned the Cuba project and that it was going to be sometime in the spring, but another incentive for that is that it's actually going to, the trip will be done probably in February. So any of you who are in snowbound areas, that might be one more little incentive for you.
Thanks, Julia. So there you have it, our very first call for proposals for the Gloria Nathanson Fund for Research in International Education. The application form will go live on October 1st, just a few days from now. And as I mentioned, there's a sample proposal out there for you to look at and encouraging words from our colleagues. And the sample proposal and the colleague testimonials are already there. Gloria and all of us who have been research authors, and I know, looks like there might be some in our audience too, are very, very happy to have you interested in this research project funding, and we very much hope that you will become the next generation.
Dun, dun, dun. If there are any questions, we'd encourage you to put those in the chat box line now. Type those in. We would be happy to answer any questions you might have. I'll give you a couple of minutes.
Could I ask a question of the group, and feel free to type your response? Let's see, how can I word this? Do you feel that your institution or your employer would support you being able to spend some of your work time on a project like this? That's something that's a big change from the days of yore when we had U.S. government funding, and each of these peer workshop reports also had a fundraising function, you know, where we had to beat the bushes for funding to help us with the costs for these projects. So, I'm really happy to see Amanda saying yes, that's great. If you haven't thought of that yet for your project, do approach your supervisor, your employer, talk with them about that.
We are creating a poll as we speak. I see Michael working away to create a poll with
Great.
that question.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike.
It is. Go ahead and fill out this poll that Michael just created.
Boy, it's really great to see such a huge number of you responding yes.
Anne, do you remember your first ever research project? Was it one of these? Was it the Soviet?
My very first one? Well, my very first one outside of ECE, where I started my career in credential evaluation, was the peer workshop report, the Poland. And one of the reasons I included my comments in the testimonials about that, because at the time when I applied, I'd only been working in the field of international education for 2 years. And I thought there was no way that that they would choose me. Because, I mean, to me, the people who wrote these books and did this research were the gods of our profession and had, millions of years of experience. And I just thought I wouldn't have a chance. And it was my boss at ECE, Jim Fry, who encouraged me to apply and told me about how important it was to have colleagues of all experience levels involved. And as it turned out, I was well qualified because I had started making myself a Poland expert, a Slavic language expert. So, but initially I wasn't interested in going for it, but I did, and it changed my life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So it looks like about 75% of you feel you that responded do have your employer support. That's great.
If you close your eyes for a moment, I'm going to go back to our first slide with Julia's and my email addresses. And whoops, I went too far. There we are. And if you have questions or you'd like to just talk about ideas you might have, you're welcome to email us. If we find that a couple of people have a similar idea, a similar country or something like that, maybe we could assist in connecting everyone with the same idea. That would all be something we could help you with. But you're welcome to contact us with any questions or ideas, and I hope you appreciate the historical overview because I think it's really important. We always talk about how educational systems are always changing, and so there's always a need for this type of research. And we're just really, really happy that you who are on the webinar today are interested in this. And we really hope to hear from you, and we hope that you will submit a proposal. And as I said, even if your proposal isn't accepted, the process of doing it is very, very valuable. And next year, the following year, we'll always be there. And should you submit a proposal that doesn't get accepted, you're welcome to come back to us too and ask for help or feedback or input, whatever we can do to help you guys really become the next generation.
Thank you to everyone for taking the time. It doesn't look like we have any questions, at least not that you want to post onto the chat box. But once again, feel free to contact us directly. We appreciate you taking the time today to be with us, and we sure hope that we hear from you through this project or in any of the other ways we showed you on how you can get involved further. Thanks again. Thank you, Anne, for your time.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone, and all the best, and we're looking forward to seeing you in the future.